Hello, it's Scotland at 7 and it's Friday the 15th of April. That brings us to day 51 of Vladimir Putin's illegal occupation and invasion of Ukraine. So I'm shortly going to go over today's updates from that conflict, and later on we're going to be showing you some footage we recorded today because we have been out on the road with the outside broadcast truck. So more of that coming up in a few minutes. But let's first of all look at the update. Ukraine, day 51. After we'd been off the air last night, the Russian military confirmed that their battleship Moskva had indeed sunk. Today, Ukrainian government advisor Anton Gerashchenko claimed on Telegram that the captain of the Moskva, Anton Krupin, died during the explosion and fire on the ship. Russia still denies that its Black Sea flagship was struck by a Ukrainian missile. The Russians agreed last night that the ship had suffered damage, but they haven't explained what was the origin of the fire. They were last night apparently towing the ship to port, but it has in fact sunk before it got there. So that has now been confirmed by the Russian military. In the port city of Mariupol, outnumbered and outgunned, Ukrainian forces are holding out against the odds in the city's Azovstal steelworks. Ole Zadanov, a Kyiv military analyst, said that the factory is an enormous space with so many buildings that the Russians simply can't find the Ukrainian forces. Zadanov suggested that's why the Russians may choose to use chemical weapons instead to, as he said, smoke them out. A Nottinghamshire man has been captured by the Russians. Russian television showed pictures of Aidan Aslan, a 28-year-old from Newark, Nottinghamshire, with a cut on his forehead as he was led around in handcuffs. The family described this footage as propaganda. The Press Association reports that Mr. Aslan was among those who surrendered during the siege of Mariupol. Finland's Minister for Foreign Affairs, Titi Tuppurainen, said that the people of Finland seem to have already made up their minds on membership of NATO. The decision to join the defensive military bloc has not yet been made, but she says it's highly likely. Ukrainians wanting to flee the cities of Mariupol, Berdyansk, Tokmak, Energodar and Zaporizhzhia were told today by Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk that 9 evacuation corridors had been agreed. Russia has warned that missile strikes in Kyiv will increase following reports of powerful explosion in the capital city overnight. Russia claims to have hit 13 military facilities and to have shot down a Ukrainian Mi-8 helicopter near Chernigov. And now on to the SNP's campaign for the Scottish Council elections. The Scottish National Party showed off their campaign bus for the Scottish Council election campaign with a media conference today at the Law in Dundee, which was held this morning. The key theme of the SNP campaign will be the cost of living crisis, which the party calls a cost of living squeeze. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, who was in Dundee, said that every SNP councillor elected will help the cost of living squeeze, supporting those on lowest incomes and tackling fuel poverty. As the First Minister arrived at the Law, she stood for photos with her party's candidates for the Dundee Council before I had the opportunity to talk to her. So here's that footage from this morning. Good morning, First Minister. So this is the start of your campaign tour and the bus is behind you there, and you're clearly sending a message to tell Boris to ease the squeeze. Now I want to ask you about pensioners and people on fixed benefits. They of course don't have any opportunity to increase their income. Are you calling on the Chancellor and the UK Government to increase those benefits in line with inflation?
We've been calling on the UK Government to do what the Scottish Government has already done in terms of benefits that we have control over, which is increase them much more in line with inflation. So Scottish government control benefits have increased by 6%, almost double what we've seen from the UK government. So yes, where the UK government I think can make one of the biggest differences is in making sure that the support for people on some of the lowest and also fixed incomes rises at a rate that is much more commensurate with the rate of inflation.
Now, this is a council election, of course. One of the things that councils can do is grant rate relief for small businesses, business relief. Now, businesses, of course, are not capped when it comes to the increase in energy bills. Are you worried that these huge increases could push small businesses to the wall and thus losing jobs?
The increase in energy bills obviously hugely concerning for families and individuals in domestic properties across the country, but it's also a big burden that is being faced by businesses as well. And where we have smaller businesses that are operating in quite tight margins, then yes, that is a concern that could become, very, very difficult for businesses. Energy and energy markets and support for energy bills reserve matters for the UK government. They need to do more, but through business rates we will continue to support businesses to the fullest possible extent. In Scotland there already is the most generous system of business rates relief. Where in the UK one of the things we're committing to do in this election is continue to protect the small business bonus, which of course takes many tens of thousands of the smallest businesses out of business rates altogether. They were doing it.
We're in Perth today and we're having a walk through the city centre with First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. As usual, she's attracting crowds, people want to talk to her, they want to get their photograph taken with her, and great reception. One of the things that I want to talk about is the fact that we've been on the doors doing the campaign for the local authority elections, and it is quite incredible how people are reacting to Boris Johnson's behaviour during the lockdown. Even the most ardent of Tories are absolutely disgusted with the way he has behaved, and they've now added fuel to the fire with their Rwandan, what they're going to do, they're going to offshore immigrants, or illegal immigrants as they call it. What we actually mean is people who are fleeing persecution, and they're going to offshore that to Rwanda. It is going down like a lead balloon. It might play well to the hard right in areas of England, but it certainly isn't playing well here in Scotland. And it's surely only going to be a matter of time before Boris Johnson has to go.
Hiya.
Sorry, darling.
Oh,
You go for ice cream. Is that the best bit of the day?
I'm people sure we're here in Perth. We've got the First Minister visiting today, and we're all really excited and thrilled about that. We're doing the usual walkabout with loads of selfies. Our objective here in Perth and Kinross is to retake this council. We were shocked and surprised to lose it 5 years ago, and we're determined to take this back. On a good day, there's an opportunity. There might even be a majority administration, but we're certain on the current conditions we'll end up as the largest party. People are frustrated, they're depressed, they're disappointed, they're furious with Boris Johnson. The Tory vote is soft here and it's further taken, and we'll do everything possible to take it from them.
So in her press statement earlier, the First Minister said that these elections give people across Scotland the opportunity to cast their verdict on the law-breaking Prime Minister and on the shameful events by leading Tories to defend them. I guess she's thinking about Douglas Ross. The campaign bus then, as you saw, moved on to Perth, where the First Minister spent over an hour, as you could see, talking to people on the streets and posing for selfies with many passers-by. And that walkabout also gave us a chance to hear from those two other elected parliamentarians whom you saw there. First of all, that was Jim Fairley, the MSP for Perthshire South and Kinross, and he was followed by Pete Wishart, who's the Member of Parliament, the Westminster Parliament for Perth and North Perthshire. So that was a campaign bus starting off in the Law Dundee, and then we moved on to Perth. The campaign bus will be travelling to several other towns around central Scotland over this Easter weekend. There are something like 6 or 7 towns on the itinerary, so I dare say that yellow bus is going to be quite a familiar sight over the next 3 weeks. Okay, so that's the SNP have officially launched a campaign bus, if that's the right word. Okay, now on that story, of course, one of the big issues is about energy and the cost of bills. And that's a big feature of the council campaign, of course. We learned today that energy bills are likely to stay well above £2,000 for 2 years more, according to a leading analyst who warned that prolonged high prices threaten Chancellor Rishi Sunak's loan scheme to help households cope with the sky-high gas prices and a mounting cost of living crisis. Cornwall Insights, which predicted the recent 54% rise in the cap on average energy bills to £1,971 a year, said it had increased its forecast for the upcoming changes to the ceiling, which is determined by the energy regulator Ofgem. It warned that prices staying higher for longer would undermine Sunak's plan to ease the pressure on household finances by giving bill payers that one-off £200 discount, which is to be paid back in £40 instalments over 5 years. Cornwall left the prediction for the upcoming winter unchanged, estimating that the price cap will hit £2,607 a year, meaning households will have seen their bills double in the space of a year. While it expects the cap to fall from that record high, it no longer expects a significant drop. Its forecast for the winter period starting in 2023 is now £2,284, and that's up from a prediction of £2,040, which they made last month. Cornwall analysts believe this price cap will still be as high as £2,233 by the spring of 2024. That change comes after gas prices stopped dropping sharply and began to level off, with the risk now weighted towards further increases. Craig Lowry, principal consultant at Cornwall Insight, urged the government to come up with new measures to help households cope with bills and reconsider its omission of energy efficiency from Boris Johnson's energy strategy, which was unveiled last week. It was called the Energy Security Strategy. Cornwall said, "The cheapest energy is that which you don't use. So to reduce bills for consumers, the government really must look again at how to support reductions in energy consumption for all consumers, including those in fuel poverty." That was according to Mr. Lowry. The exclusion of material new policies for energy efficiency in the Energy Security Strategy was a missed opportunity. While the government has already offered some support for consumers to pay their energy bills this year, this was before forecasts began predicting further rises and over a longer period. It is possible the government could take further action in the autumn, but we have no guarantee that further support will be forthcoming. Of course, many of the variables which drive our forecasts can change before the cap setting period for next year, but the risk is weighted to upwards rather than downwards pressure on the price cap right now. And with cost of living rising and inflation hitting a record high in March before the cap rise of the 1st of April feeds through, then even the potential for these sorts of cap levels to rise in 23 will be concerning for hard-hit households. So that was Cornwall giving their projection that high bills are going to be with us for at least the next 2 years. A Conservative MP has shared the paper that says that the climate emergency is not really happening. Steve Baker, Conservative MP for Wickham and a leading member of the Net Zero Scrutiny Group, shared the report produced by the Global Warming Policy Foundation, that's the GWPF, and he shared that on his Twitter feed. He and the Net Zero Scrutiny Group, comprising about 20 Tory MPs, have previously said that they don't deny the science around climate change, but merely disagree with the costs involved in some of the methods proposed to reach net zero. When asked if he agreed with the report, Mr. Baker said, "I am clear that questions of climate science should be handled scientifically. The last thing we need is politicians and activists twisting the science to their particular ends." Mr. Baker is a trustee of the GWPF, and the group of Tories have used its research to make their arguments previously. Joe Tetlow, senior political advisor for Green Alliance, a charity and think tank, said, "The mask has slipped. Promoting climate denial from GWPF is not scrutiny of policies, but denying the basis for action. dangerous and wrong. The non-peer-reviewed paper, the one which Mr. Baker circulated, was authored by a retired scientist, Ole Hulum, who was a professor at the University of Oslo. Professor Hulum, has repeatedly claimed that rather than human impact, it's the sun and the moon's influence on Earth that explains most of the historical and current climate change. In 2013, he predicted that climate would most likely become colder over the next 10 to 15 years. In the new report, he claims that only gentle warming has happened and that there is no climate crisis. By contrast, a recent report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that's the IPCC, found that human activity was unequivocally the cause of rapid changes to climate, including sea level rises, melting polar ice and glaciers, heat waves, floods and droughts. The IPCC said that some of the effects of climate breakdown are now inevitable. Hundreds of scientists contributed to the IPCC report, with 234 scientists in the first working group, 270 in the second and 278 in the third. The report was signed off by the governments of all 195 member countries. Excuse me. And now the cost of the government's offshoring asylum claimants to Rwanda, a policy which was announced yesterday. The cost of flying UK asylum seekers to Rwanda, the policy announced by the UK government yesterday during Parliament's recess, is said to be around £30,000 per person. Conservative MP Andrew Mitchell said it would be cheaper to put them up in the Ritz for a year. He argued that the incredibly expensive scheme was also impractical and immoral. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon earlier today said that the proposal was disgusting and despicable, adding that she did not think it would be effective. It's reported that civil servants had concerns about the practicality of the scheme on value for money grounds, and so it had to be pushed through by the Home Secretary Priti Patel. Support for the scheme has, however, come from right-wing and anti-immigration parties in Europe, with Denmark's Minister for Immigration Mattias Tesfaye saying, "I hope more European countries in the near future will support this vision for tackling irregular immigration." In Belgium, leader of the far-right Vlaams Belang party, Tom van Grijken, also supported the plan as it agreed with his Fortress Europe policy. The UK Home Office Minister Tom Pursglove said that the offshoring plan would crush the business model of the people smugglers. Prime Minister Johnson apparently wants the scheme to begin in about 6 weeks, just after the council elections, which the Conservatives fear will go badly for them. And Palestine now. Medics say that more than 150 Palestinians were injured in clashes that erupted when Israel's riot police entered Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, in the most significant violence at the holy site since similar scenes sparked a war last year. Most of the Palestinian injuries on Friday were incurred by rubber bullets, stun grenades and beatings with police batons, according to the Palestine Red Crescent. Israel said its forces entered before dawn prayers on Friday today to remove rocks and stones that it said had been collected in anticipation of violence. The holy site, which is sacred to Jews and Muslims, has often been the scene of Israeli-Palestinian unrest, and tensions were already heightened amid a recent surge in bloodshed. Repeated clashes at the site last year led to an 11-day war with Hamas militants in the Gaza Strip. The violence comes at a particularly sensitive time. Ramadan this year coincides with Passover, a major week-long Jewish holiday beginning on Friday at sundown, and also the Christian Holy Week, which culminates on Easter Sunday. The holidays are expected to bring tens of thousands of people to Jerusalem's Old City, the home to the major sites sacred to all three religions. Videos circulating online showed Palestinians hurling rocks and fireworks and police firing tear gas and stun grenades on the sprawling esplanade surrounding the mosque. Others showed worshippers barricading themselves inside the mosque amid what appeared to be clouds of tear gas. The Palestinian Red Crescent said one of the Palestinian guards at the site was shot in the eye with a rubber bullet. Israeli police say that 3 officers were wounded from massive stone throwing, as they put it, with 2 evacuated from the scene for treatment. The Israeli Foreign Ministry said dozens of masked men carrying Palestinian and Hamas flags marched to the compound early on Friday and gathered stones. They said police were forced to enter the grounds to disperse the crowds and remove the stones and rocks in order to prevent further violence. That was in a tweet. Police said they waited until prayers were over and the crowds had begun to disperse. In a statement, they said crowds started hurling rocks in the direction of the Western Wall, the Jewish holy site, forcing them to act. Palestinians view any large deployment of police at Al-Aqsa as a major provocation. The mosque is the 3rd holiest site in Islam. It's built on the hilltop in Jerusalem's old city that's perhaps the most sacred site for Jews, who refer to it as the Temple Mount because it was the site of the Jewish temples of antiquity. It has also been a major flashpoint for Israeli-Palestinian violence for decades and was the centre of the 2000 to 2005 Palestinian Intifada. Tensions have risen in recent weeks after a series of attacks by Palestinians that killed 14 people inside Israel. In response, Israel has carried out a wave of arrests and military occupations across the occupied West Bank, setting off clashes in which at least 25 Palestinians had been killed. Turning now to the USA, we've been reporting from time to time on the legal ramifications of the attack on the Capitol by Donald Trump supporters. That occurred, of course, in January last year during attempts by rioters to prevent the certification of Joe Biden's presidency. Well, a jury found on Thursday yesterday, which was after we went on the air, jury convicted an Ohio man who claimed that he was following former President Donald Trump's orders when he looted items from the US Capitol during last year's riot, handing another notable win to prosecutors. A federal jury in the District of Columbia found Dustin Thompson, aged 38, guilty of all charges he faced, including obstruction of an official proceeding and theft of government property. Thompson had admitted to entering the Capitol and stealing a bottle of liquor and a coat rack during the riots. But in a novel legal strategy, Thompson argued to the jury that he was acting at Trump's behest and that the former president is ultimately responsible for the mob that stormed the Capitol. He said, "Besides being ordered by the president to go to the Capitol, I don't know what I was thinking," Thomas told the jury, according to CNN. "I was caught up in the moment." US District Judge Reggie Waltons, who oversaw the trial, will sentence Thompson at a hearing in July. The judge ordered Thompson to be detained in jail until that hearing. The US Justice Department has now won all 3 January the 6th prosecutions which have gone to trial. Excuse me. The US Justice, as I said, US Justice Department has now won all 3 January 6 prosecutions that have gone to jury trial. One defendant, however, was acquitted in a non-jury trial. Altogether, about 800 people have been charged with crimes relating to the January 6 attack. And finally, St Andrews University has formally welcomed its first female black rector. Dr. Leila Hussein OBE was today, that's on Friday the 15th, officially installed as rector of St Andrews University. That's their 54th rector. The official installation ceremony followed a traditional student drag, that was yesterday, Thursday, which saw students lead the new rector on a tour of local hostelries in a day of celebration which included a procession through the town and a pier walk. Dr. Hussein was elected rector in November 2020 for her 3-year term, a psychotherapist and campaigner and global leader on gender rights. She is the first black woman to be elected rector at St Andrews. Dr. Hussein said, "2 productive, educational and energising years into my term of rector, I'm honoured to be partaking in the storied traditions of the rector's drag, the formal installation ceremony. As Rector, it's my greatest honour and responsibility to represent student voices at the highest levels of decision making at this historic university. The entirety of my term as Rector has been committed to support for student advocacy and activism, and dedicated to the great structural change that such work contributes to. To each student at this university who's demanding greater support, accessibility and inclusivity, I truly admire your contributions to the St Andrews community and hope to continue supporting your work in my final year as your Rector. Since 1858, the Rector has been elected by the students. Dr. Hussain follows in the footsteps of a long list of illustrious former Rectors, including the author J.M. Barrie and Rudyard Kipling, Monty Python founding member John Cleese, and Catherine Stiller MEP. In addition to being President of the University Court, the highest governing body of the university, the Rector also plays an informal pastoral role for students. Okay, so those are our stories today. Being the holidays, now there's not much happening. Of course, the Parliaments are in recess. Lots of MPs and MSPs are on holiday. But of course, we did manage to catch up with a number of them today in Dundee and in Perth. So we'll be hoping to do more of that. I hope you enjoyed our outside broadcast coverage. We do have the facilities, but not enough people here. And if we had more people, more volunteers, and indeed more cash, we would certainly make more of that kind of trip to go around Scotland, to get out of Glasgow and meet people and see what's happening locally. So we spoke to a lot of people today off camera in both Perth and Dundee who said that they supported our work and they were very glad to see our programmes and are delighted with the work we are doing here. But we did make the point to them we can only do that if we have financial support and other material support. So there's three ways in which you could help if you do think that Broadcasting Scotland should continue and should help to be a force and putting out objective news for Scotland that's not mediated through London media. So three ways to help. First of all, of course, we do need money. Our bills are going up too. So please have a look at the appeal, which is on broadcastingscotland.scot.donate. Now, if you can manage anything, a £5 or £10 a month, that really would help. We know some people have sadly had to let go of their direct debits because obviously they're feeling the squeeze on the bills as we are, but we do need your support to keep going. Secondly, if anyone would like to contribute, because we were out on the road today, so there was nobody at the shop, so a big quick rush back to get tonight's programme written and edited. So if more people are able to join the team, then we'd just be able to put out a lot more stuff in that way. We've got the material stuff, we've got the van, we've got the cameras, we've got the equipment, and we just need more resources to help turn that into real programmes. And finally, if you're using social media, or if you're watching us on YouTube, please pass that on. Please pass this on to your friends and just see if you can get more people watching the programme. And of course, we're going to be busy. We intend to be busy during this next couple of weeks leading up to the elections. So the more help you can give us, then the more we'll be able to cover the elections and politics in Scotland. So that's it from me tonight. So don't forget to tune in on Sunday lunchtime when Andrew will be presenting the full Scottish. So thanks for watching. So from Hugh Stewart and the team in Glasgow, good night, and I'll see you later.